There are only a few hot-button issues more divisive than affirmative action. The debate over college admissions policies using race as one of the factors has raged for decades.
Yeah, for decades. But today, the United States Supreme Court heard a case that could settle the issue for good. And it's all centered around a school right in our very own backyard, the University of North Carolina. UNC wants to keep its affirmative action policy, and that policy allows schools to use race as one of the several determining factors when admitting students. Students on campus seem pretty split by it.
Everybody should get a fair shot, and affirmative action says that no, some people will be advantaged and other people will be disadvantaged based on the color of their skin.
I don't think there is ever a time where we won't need affirmative action or we won't need to talk about race in every system that we have in this country.
Well, now this is just the latest challenge to affirmative action. The policy has been controversial for years. Right now, here's what is allowed. Schools can use race as one of the several determining factors. However, it cannot be the sole reason for admitting a student. Schools also cannot establish a racial quota.
So the court could decide considering race at all is unconstitutional. But UNC officials say the policy is needed to improve diversity on campus. And they say it's already lacking. Take a look. Black people represent about 22% of North Carolina's population, but only 9% of the student body is black. The lawyer representing UNC says affirmative action helps schools be more representative.
A conservative activist spearheaded efforts to undo the policy. Ed Blum even recruited students at UNC to get on board with his cause. He says affirmative action is an overcorrection for our country's past wrongs.
You can't remedy past discrimination with new discrimination. For those who have suffered from preferences for whites, the remedy is not preferences for African Americans or Hispanics.
The UNC students that we heard from earlier say the issue is not about just diversity. What the Supreme Court decides will shape how Americans think about race moving forward.
Race was an important consideration in somebody's character at the beginning of the nation, and it was wrong then and it's wrong now.
I think being colorblind assumes that we are all the same and that we have the same experiences and that we have the same obstacles as well, when we don't.
The Supreme Court paired this case with a separate one raising the same question at Harvard, a private university. Calvin Yang is a student at California, Berkeley. He claims he didn't get into Harvard despite exceeding admission standards. He supports the lawsuit against Harvard. He is one of several Asian students who claim they are held to a much higher standard than other minority applicants. He says if schools really want to be diverse, well, they should focus on giving more opportunities to lower income students instead.
If you're economically disadvantaged, you should get a boost, rather than just arbitrarily looking at the ethnicity, the last name, the skin color of a particular applicant.
He says getting in wasn't an issue at Cal because admissions officers cannot consider race there. California voters banned affirmative action in 1996. 8 other states also ban it in college admissions.
Well, both schools have separate cases in front of the Supreme Court. However, the Supreme Court chose to hear the arguments together this morning. Each case, more or less, raises the same issue. They just deal with different types of schools. Of course, the UNC case could dictate policy for public schools. The Harvard one could do so for private universities.
To get the full context around this case, you need to turn back the clock. UNC's defended its affirmative action policy for many years now. It filed a brief in support of affirmative action for a case dealing with the University of Texas all the way back in the 90s. More recently, the UNC Board of Trustees has debated the policy internally. Last year, board member Marty Kotish shared a proposal prohibiting UNC from using race, sex, color, or even ethnicity in admissions or hiring.
I think that everyone that applies to the school, no matter what their race, no matter what their sex, should be treated equally and have the fair opportunity to be admitted to the school, to apply for a job, or to contract.
The motion ultimately failed to pass after other board members disagreed.
I'm concerned with the notion that diversity brings a lowering of standards, and I think our admission policy is fair, and I think this resolution is unnecessary.
The idea that somehow by creating a more diverse campus, we have to lower our standards is just false. That's not true.
A federal judge also ruled last year that UNC could continue using race as a deciding factor.
Well, it could be months and months before we learn how the Supreme Court rules in this case. Most decisions aren't delivered until the end of the court's term. That's late June or early July before they recess for summer. The exception is if a decision is unanimous, and those typically come out by December, but this topic is expected to divide the court, so it will probably be 2023 before the ruling is released. Now, these cases have huge implications on their own. They also mean a lot because the Supreme Court could overrule precedent again. Affirmative action has been protected for decades. When the court overturned Roe v. Wade last summer, experts said at the time, we should prepare for others like this.
If the court is willing to overturn its own precedent on this particular issue, we have to be cognizant that the court probably is open to overturning other precedents.
All right, so the Supreme Court rarely overturns precedent, just like you heard say, and so many justices choose to let the initial decision stand.
As you can see, the Supreme Court's geared up to make some major decisions with real impacts to North Carolina.
It can kind of be easy to block things out, what goes in Washington, but we're seeing that some of what happens there, of course, has a serious impact right here at home.